Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the guide I've promised for my new build, the Ice Queen, which lets you like speed form all the 100 nightmares at level 85, 90 in under 10 minutes. The higher level you go, the faster it goes, and you can farm them in under 5 or even less. This build is super durable. You basically instant kill everything within seconds. It's super strong, it's super easy to use, and I call it the true rogue build because we're actually using stealth, which is extremely valuable because you can interact with a lot of objects in stealth. You can even like resurrect your teammates if you're playing with your friends, which can be extremely valuable in very high nightmares that you're trying to push at lower levels, because you can use it to resurrect your teammates and just continue the dungeon without using any revives. So let's get right to it. We'll start with skills. And they are as follows. We take Puncture as our basic skill, Enhanced Puncture and Fundamental Puncture to get us energy and vulnerable to all the enemies we fight with. 5 points into Twisting Blades, our main spender. Enhanced Twisting Blades and Improved Twisting Blades to daze all the enemies we hit with Twisting Blades, which is extremely valuable for this build because the daze works with all of our other aspects and talents. We put 3 points into Sturdy for close damage reduction, 3 points into Weapon Mastery because we're using Daggers and Barber. So basically all the enemies are healthy and then they're dead. 1 point into Dash, Enhanced Dash, Discipline Dash for further daze on the enemies and increased crit strike damage they take from us when we hit them with daze. 2 point into Concussive for increased critical strike chance against knocked down enemies. Trick attacks. When we critically strike a dazed enemy, they are knocked down for half a second, which works extremely well with all of our other talents. And 2 points into Rapid Gambit so that we can evade a lot. Because that once again work with our other aspects and talents. 1 point into Dark Shroud for more durability, Enhanced Dark Shroud, and Subverting Dark Shroud for increased movement speed. 1 point into Poison Trap, Enhanced Poison Trap, so that once again we knock down enemies, that gives us more crit strike chance and damage and whatnot. And 1 point into Concealment, because, as I've said, this is a true rogue build. So we're using stealth. 3 points into Exploit, and 3 points into Malice. If you're feeling like your survivability is not good enough, you can actually take 3 points out of Malice and put them into Siphoning Strikes for more healing. But it should not be necessary because of the aspect called Stolen Vigor that we are using, and that I will explain a bit later. 1 point into Cult Imbuement, Enhanced Cult Imbuement and Mixed Cult Imbuement for increased damage against chilled and frozen enemies. 3 points into Frigid Finis, again increased damage to chilled and frozen enemies, even 60% multiplicative damage against frozen enemies, and basically all the enemies will be frozen at all times, so that's why we're also getting 3 points of this from our neck. It's extremely valuable. 1 point into Deadly Venom so that we can get into Debilitating Toxins, which further increases our durability as we take 15% less damage from poisoned enemies, and 1 point into Alchemical Knowledge just for extra attack speed because, well, why not? Attack speed is really good, especially with trying to proc lucky hit chance kind of skills. 3 points into Innervation for Lucky Hit to give us energy. 3 points into Trap Mastery, because when our trap activates, we get 12% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable and crowd-controlled enemies, which are basically all the enemies. 1 point into Adrenaline Rush so that we can get into Haste, and we put 3 points there so that when we are above 50% energy we gain increased movement speed, below we get increased attack speed, which helps us build the energy back up. Our key passive is momentum. Momentum gives us damage reduction, increased energy regeneration, and movement speed. And it's super important for this build because of the aspect Stolen Vigor. So let's look at the gear and at the aspects now. On our helmet, we go for maximum life, cooldown reduction, total armor, all stats. All stats is very important there as well. Otherwise, we will not be able to reach the requirements for our rare nodes. The aspect here is of might, so that basic skills grant us 20% damage reduction. On our chest, we go for as much damage reduction as humanly possible, flat damage reduction, total armor, damage reduction from distant enemies. I have damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, close enemies would be better, or even life would be good. The aspect here is Stolen Vigor. That's the one that's the most important for this build, because each stack of the momentum key passive heals you for 331. What that means is that we have basically 1000 HPS. 1000 HPS at all times, basically, when we are in a fight, because 3 stacks of momentum you have at all times. On our gloves, we are using ranks of Twisted Blades, Twisting Blades, Lucky Hit chance, Attack Speed, Crit Strike chance, and the aspect is Frostbitten. Chilled enemies hit by your grenade skills have a chance equal to double your Crit Strike chance to be instantly frozen. Instantly frozen. That's why this build is called Ice Queen. We're just freezing enemies left and right. And we do, again, another extra damage, Crit Strike damage against frozen enemies. This works well. Let's just skip to the ring now with our aspect of surprise. The true rogue build, you know, stealth, surprise, motherfucker. Okay, so when we evade, that's why we're taking the talent that lowers our evade cooldown. We leave behind stun grenades that deal damage and stun enemies for half a second. That works so well with Frostbitten aspect. It also helps us stagger bosses faster. Next, we go for Ambrose. Ambrose aspect on our legs, where we go for, again, as much damage reduction as humanly possible, damage reduction while injured. It's important to have that at least once. Damage reduction from distant enemies, damage reduction from close enemies, total armor, basically all the damage reduction, all the survivability we can possibly get. What Ambrose does is that Lucky Hit is that critical strikes with marksman skills have up to 60% chance to grant free Dark Shroud. That's why we are playing Dark Shroud, but it's actually not on our action bars. We don't need to press the button because we get it at all times, and we're basically almost always at full stacks. As for our boots, we are using Penitent Greaves, which are, again, extremely valuable. We do increased damage to chilled targets, we get movement speed, which is what we want. But this build actually works with normal boots as well. You're just gonna deal a little less damage, but it works perfectly fine. What's super important is that you get the evade cooldown reduction whenever you attack an enemy. Then for the stats, you want movement speed, dodge chance, damage reduction while injured, and cooldown reduction. Okay? That's basically gonna give you an unlimited evade. You're gonna have, together with the talents, like 0.5 second cooldown on evade. You can just press the button non-stop, which will just throw grenades left and right, and you will proc your gloves aspect and whatnot. But Penitent Greaves obviously are better if you have them. For our ranged weapon, we're using crossbow because we need to stack as much vulnerable damage, crit strike damage as possible. What's important here is that we get all stats. That's super important. The same thing as with our helmet. We need all stats to reach our breakpoints for rare nodes. So all stats, dexterity, crit strike damage, damage to close, vulnerable damage there would be better, but unfortunately I didn't get that. Damage to close is still pretty good. For our aspect here, we're using accelerating so that our crit strikes with core skill increase our attack speed. It all works super well together to get as much energy back up and to proc as many lucky hits as humanly possible. For our neck, as I've already said in the skills, we're using 3 ranks of Frigid Finis. That gives us the ultimate, the highest damage profile possible when enemies are frozen, and then everything else should be damage reduction again, or like defensive stats. So we are having damage reduction while injured, damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction from distant enemies. Total armor here would be super valuable instead of probably damage reduction while injured. For our aspect here, we're using Disobedience so that we get increased armor whenever we deal any form of damage, because we cannot really reach 10,000 breakpoint of our armor to actually get 13,000 armor, which is the cap for maximum damage reduction. We are using this aspect on our neck because it goes over just 30% increase. This way we can actually reach the breakpoint. And on our other ring, we are using attacking enemies with basic skills. It's the expectant aspect, gives us increased damage of our core skill cast by, for me, it's 8% up to 30%. On both rings, you want crit strike damage, crit strike chance, vulnerable damage, and then one of the rings life and one of the rings resource generation. If you get life twice, it's still okay. It's still more than okay. But resource generation is pretty strong. Unfortunately for me, it's the lowest roll here. You can get almost 20%, which is just insane and helps a lot. Now, for our hearts, obviously, because it's the strongest heart ever, we are using Barber, which stores all of our damage that the target takes, and then after, for me, it's 3.3 seconds. All of the damage is multiplied and explodes. So you're basically an AoE monster, and you can even like pump all of your damage into one target. That's actually what you should do. Just pump it into one target. When it explodes, it's gonna kill everything around it. Then we go for Heart of Revenge. Another damage reduction. For me, it's 19.5%, almost the maximum, which is 20%. And then you do some slight damage, slight AoE damage when you use Subterfuge skill. But that's not the important part. The important part is the damage reduction. And then we're using Heart of Trickery, which is probably, again, after Barber, the most important one. Our subterfuge skills, so our stealth and our poison trap, leave behind shadow decoy, which will taunt all enemies, and they will not only attack it, but the ranged monsters will actually run to it. They will not try to ranged attack it. They will all stack in one place, and that's the best thing for us to happen, because ranged enemies are kind of like our nemesis. If they all stack in one place, we just freeze them up, kill them within 1 second, and voila. That's it. That's how the fight works, basically. For our weapons, we're using Ashira's Conjure for, again, more attack speed, so more lucky hits. And another dagger. As I've said, we're using daggers to get the multiplier against healthy enemies, because of Barber, they're healthy and then they're dead. And here the aspect is Blade Dancer's aspect. It's the bread and butter of any Twisting Blades build, obviously, so you cannot skip this one. For the modifiers, you want vulnerable damage, crit strike damage, all stats, and then dexterity would be pretty awesome. Now, to look at the Paragon board, let's just quickly storm through it. You will have the link to Maxroll build planner in the description below, so you can just check the written guide, basically the written build. And so here, let's just quickly go through the glyphs that I'm using. I'm using Devious first, then we go for Diminish, we go for Combat. Here we're actually taking our legendary node as well, which is Cheap Shot, so that we get more damage against crowd controlled enemies, which are, well, all the enemies. Then we go for Control, Turf for more damage reduction against close enemies. The damage reduction there is very important. And Closer. Closer again, while wielding melee weapon, we take 10% reduced damage. Our last board would be Exploit. You can see what boards, whether it's Tricks of the Trade, Cheap Shot, etc., or Exploit Weakness, I'm using in the builder. So you don't have to worry about that. I just don't want to spend 20 minutes explaining the Paragon board. So this one, I think, is way better to just read through. And that's the build. In the video I've posted previously, you can see how strong it is, how fast it is. Basically, the gameplay is you pop your frozen imbuement, cult imbuement, you go in, place your trap, everything will stack up, you attack them with twisting blades, you evade, drop your grenades, everything gets frozen, Barber explodes, everything gets annihilated, like it disappears from the map, depending on the dungeon, like what you need, and that's where stealth becomes super handy to speed farm. You can skip like half of the dungeon. On the first pack, you're basically gonna proc all of your Dark Shroud, so you're gonna have 5 stacks, you're gonna have a lot of extra movement speed, then you just pop your stealth. Let's say you just need to find an Animus Carrier or whatever, so you pop your stealth. You're so fast in stealth that you basically storm through half the dungeon, you just find the Animus Carrier, you kill it, kill the enemies around, the cooldown for stealth will come back up, you can stealth again, skip enemies, and as I said, you can clear dungeons. Some of the dungeons you can clear in 3 minutes or less. It's the absolute best build you can get, and it's super easy to use. Like, you don't really need a lot of skill, you have an insane amount of HPS, so even if you get hit by poison, if you're standing and fighting against a lot of mobs, the healing, the survivability, all the damage reduction that you get from this is through the roof. So I hope this helps you guys. I hope you liked the video, and see you in the next one. See ya. Ciao.